The O'Reilly Factor's on tonight.
Last night, on my orders, America's armed forces began strikes against ISIL targets in Syria.
Big expansion of the war on terror, but a necessary one. The question tonight, what took Barack Obama so long? Talking Points will answer.
The problem with the internet, as with human trafficking and online sexual predators, it's also caused a lot of grief to our kids.
American children increasingly in danger on the net. What do Kelly, Powers, and Crowley think about that? We'll find out.
For him to just leave us like that, it was a very big betrayal. At best, a deserter, and at worst, a traitor.
Also ahead, what's holding up the investigation into Sergeant Bo Bergdahl's conduct? It should have been completed a long time ago. Now, charges of cover-up are seeping out. Is it legal? On the case.
Caution. You are about to enter the no-spin zone. Factor begins right now. Hi, I'm Bill O'Reilly. Thanks for watching us tonight. Bombing the terrorists in Syria. That is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. Last night, bombs began falling on suspected ISIS and al-Qaeda positions in the war-torn country of Syria. This morning, the president said this.
The overall effort will take time. There will be challenges ahead. But we're going to do what's necessary to take the fight to this terrorist group for the security of the country and the region and for the entire world. Thanks. God bless our troops. God bless America.
But what took so long? On June 16th, Talking Points opined this way. I fully expect President Obama to begin bombing the al-Qaeda army very soon. If he does not do that, it would be an enormous dereliction of duty. He is the commander-in-chief. Al-Qaeda wants to kill us. So he must send a message to them and to the largely cowardly world. We will not allow savages to decimate the world. That is the message that must be sent. Again, I expect the commander-in-chief to begin bombing the al-Qaeda army in Iraq and Syria forthwith. Well, it took 3 months for Mr. Obama to finally make the call. The reason for the delay is twofold. First, the president is fearful of creating a wider war because that will diminish his legacy of ending the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. The president sees himself as a peacemaker, a civilizing force in a brutal world. He's much more interested in fighting global warming than some killers in a desert. But when the American people began demanding action after ISIS beheaded 2 U.S. citizens, the president had no choice but to act. Second, for some reason, America's intel system is not working properly. The USA was caught by surprise when ISIS invaded Iraq. Again, caught unaware when Putin took Crimea. By the way, Putin condemned the Syrian bombing last night, saying it violated that country's sovereign territory. That's what Putin said. Overall, Washington seems befuddled by the danger we the people face. Former Obama administration officials like Leon Panetta and Robert Gates say the fault lies with a timid commander-in-chief. And that's most likely true, but because security decisions are shrouded in secrecy, we don't know for sure. Mr. Obama did have a good point when he declined to send weapons to the so-called Syrian moderates, citing lack of clarity of exactly who they are. Tons of sophisticated U.S. weaponry now in the hands of ISIS because the corrupt Iraqi army abandoned the hardware. But now the fight's on because ISIS is so barbaric, so dangerous, that it can no longer be ignored or allowed to prosper because politics impedes action against it. Last night I called for a worldwide anti-terror mercenary army to be formed, which would be trained and administered by the USA under the supervision of Congress. It would be funded by the coalition that President Obama is putting together. The idea is to have a rapid deployment force capable of confronting Islamic terrorists anywhere in the world without the chaotic political nonsense that prevents effective action against these killers. The memo's posted on BillO'Reilly.com, and we'll have your mail on it later. But hear me on this. That force will eventually have to happen. And that's the memo. Now for the top story tonight, reaction. Joining us from Washington, Eric Prince, founder of the Blackwater Organization. Mr. Prince, former Navy SEAL, is the author of the book Civilian Warriors, The Inside Story of Blackwater and the Unsung Heroes of the War on Terror. Mr. Prince, Blackwater is a paramilitary organization. You sold the company. You did contract work for the U.S. government, other governments around the world, correct?
We did a lot of security work, aviation, logistics, training, all of that sort of thing for the U.S. and allied countries.
All
yes.
right, so you know what I'm talking about because Blackwater guys, the guys that you hired, are mercenaries. They're paid to provide security and to launch operations that some countries feel they need. So that my overall call for 25,000-man force trained by special forces here, led by American officers and NATO officers, realistic?
It's possible and doable. You know, there's three arguments against this. There's reliability, accountability, and cost. You know, the average cost per soldier in Afghanistan right now is $2.1 million a year. I think the American public is war weary. It's not going to work to try to just drive ISIS out of Iraq or crush them in Iraq and Syria with just air power. It's never worked, air power alone. Someone has to go clear them out of those towns, villages, and alleys.
Okay, but you say costs. I mean, we've already taken care of the costs by the coalition would fund it. You know, countries like Saudi Arabia, very wealthy countries, but all around the world they would kick in to fund the force. And it is expensive, but Americans should not be bearing, you know, we're bearing the war on terror. We're fighting it. You know, our blood and treasure in the USA. That's got to stop. We can't afford to do it all over the world. Just us. Just us. We need to get some kind of anti-terror unit. Now, there's other concerns, though. In Blackwater, for example, 2007, guards shot 17 people, civilians, in Baghdad. That was a big controversy. You had your side. The people who don't like Blackwater had their side. But if Congress is overseeing, and American officers are leading, and NATO officers as well, you know, in war, bad things happen inevitably, but there is control. There's a central control over such a force.
Sure. Just like for Blackwater in Iraq in 2007, we were under the control of Congress and under the control of the State Department. So you have to set clear rules of engagement for the people you ask to do very difficult things in dangerous places. You're right. Ultimately, this will fall to some kind of contracted force because the U.S. public will not stand for thousands of Americans.
And it's not right. It's not right that we, the USA, bear all of the brunt of this worldwide terror. And you just pointed out, it's not, even if you wipe out ISIS now, it's going to be another ISIS. They're going to keep coming. And they're not going to stop. We're not going to convince them to stop. These are fanatical people that believe that Allah is ordering them to kill infidels. And there's an unlimited supply of them. So we're just going to have a containment policy whereby we don't let it get out of control. Now, the important thing to understand is this doesn't replace the U.S. military, all right? It complements it. The U.S. military is still there, still does what the U.S. military does. But the politics is freezing the West. Do you not agree with that? The politics of confronting Russia, of confronting ISIS, of confronting Pakistan, it's freezing us into doing nothing, and the Islamists and Putin see it as a huge weakness.
The U.S. government, the U.S. military has mastered the most expensive way to wage war. They've proven that in Iraq and Afghanistan. They haven't been that effective there. So finding a cheap, sustainable way that you can keep presence into these areas, to keep pressure on Islamists, to keep to support friends and be that long-term dwell is about the only way you're going to do it. It's as part of American history as apple pie. Across the street from the White House, you have Lafayette Park. There's statues of Lafayette, Rochambeau, and Steuben Kosciuszko, contractors, mercenaries that came and helped build the Continental Army.
There's no doubt about it. The Polish people were trained, Kosciuszko and those guys that came over, they were paid by Continental Congress. Final question for you. Did the bad guys in Iraq fear Blackwater?
Well, we did 100,000 missions with no one under our care ever killed or injured. They knew that if they got in a firefight, they would be in it. So, you know, fortunately, less than 0.5% of those times of all those missions did we ever have to use any weapons. So I'd say that's a very good safety record, and not the trigger-happy, you know, renegades that people characterize them as being.
And I believe that if you had an elite worldwide force made up of the best soldiers who needed or wanted to fight terrorism for money, that the terrorists would fear that force.
There's a huge amount of professional talent in the United States and around the world, good men that will answer the call, do a professional job, and bear that burden so that the active duty doesn't have to. The same argument happened back in the early 70s when the U.S. was going from a draft army to a volunteer army. Westmoreland called the U.S. Army an army of mercenaries because they were going to be paid a market wage just for serving as a volunteer.
All right. Well, we appreciate it, Mr. Prince. Thank you. Next on the rundown, why do some Americans oppose creative military action against terrorists? And later, is it legal on the strange investigation of Sergeant Bo Bergdahl, traded for 5 Taliban killers? What is the holdup here? Factors coming right